Just got back from work a short time ago, and I was thinking about some stories I could write about Nancy. Writing is one of my favorite hobbies, and it's something that in another life I would have probably tried to do professionally, but we live in an era where people don't read, so I felt like, well, what's the point? The first one that comes to mind is something having to do with her parents. Because with Nancy, like in terms of the stuff people mostly know about her, it's her relationship with her husband, it's her relationships rather that were strained with her children, and people don't really know the closeness of her and her mom, or her and her stepdad. And I think that's something that probably should have a maybe 10 chapter story about, just kind of reconciling her past with the present. Another story I thought of, and this one will probably be the most controversial, involves a character based off myself, switching places with her, in the sense that she would be transported to the 2010s, 2020s, and have to, like, deal with the high cost of a lot of things and just some of the scams that relate to either employment or different, telemarketers and whatnot. And then my character would be in her place as someone who is very close to, President Reagan, and is sort of seen as like an assistant or some other. Because I wouldn't, like in this capacity, there would just be no first lady. It's more so he has been knowingly switched with her and is abiding by her request to watch over her husband. And even though he kind of like views him in a negative way or in a not so, the way you would just kind of think offhandedly about some historical figure that you might not have thought too well of based off of the recollections of people that were there at the time, he would gradually become more genuinely liking of Reagan, or at the very least, more receptive to his humanity. He would see him as more than just this person who was president, 30, 40 years ago. Because I've always said that from my perspective, and not necessarily that of my parents or my grandparents, uh, I'm someone who, like, President Reagan died when I was in kindergarten. So in all of my living memory of American politics, he is someone who has mostly just been mentioned, never really, as like an active figure. Whereas with Nancy, who lasted up until I was in the end of high school, vividly remember the period where she was alive. I saw a few of her public appearances, kind of like right as I was starting to really get into this stuff, is when she had like her health getting worse. Um, so I guess that probably ties into why she is a more central figure to my, I guess, nostalgic lens of the 80s than President Reagan is, even if, more people obviously will think of him because he was the president, she was first lady, but you get the idea. But yeah, this story, it's supposed to be a thing where, like, he goes to her period, my character, and he's really frustrated, by being stuck with this old man, and I have to follow the Gipper, as they call him. But over the course of maybe 10 chapters, 20 chapters, some double digit number, he becomes more aware of just how much Reagan is, nice to the people that are friendly with him, and that there are admirable qualities about the man that he can look back and respect. And then in turn with Nancy, I would have her kind of be like, "Oh, why does he hate living in the 2000s so much? All these amazing phones and devices." And she really just can't understand what would cause a person living in a more advanced period, from a technological standpoint, to be nostalgic for, when things were not as sophisticated, or at least as they appeared to be. And over the course of the story, her trying to work the jobs that he has, her trying to just survive, she really gets receptive to like what his plight was. So they basically both in switching places become more like the other, where he develops a genuine either liking for Reagan as a person and true concern for his well-being, and then in turn Nancy becomes more aware of just how hard and how easy it is to desire to move up in the economic ladder and then just get screwed over by whether it's a lot of these jobs that don't pay people anything or they barely give you any hours. No, it would really like go into the minutia of she would see him as someone who is trying, and now in having experienced what he has, she's more understanding of the fact that yeah, people do sometimes try as hard as they can, and they're still poor, not because they're going out and buying a bunch of stuff they don't need. They just aren't given enough opportunities. No, I think that one might be a little controversial because it's supposed to be like a social commentary just on how people always talk about like nostalgia blinds someone, but there are things about these earlier periods that sound a hell of a lot nicer than what we have now, and I think that that would be a fun way to just kind of explore it. The only thing kind of holding me back from going further into that is I do want my character and Nancy to interact over the course of the story, like to actually speak to each other, and when you separate them like that, where one is in the place of the other, it's hard to get interactions directly between them. So I probably would have to find a way to just kind of make it to where there's like an interval period where they talk after every 5 or 6 chapters, or even just with some regularity, to where it's like by the time the story's over, they've spoken to each other multiple times and kind of seen the evolution where one is more like the other. The last one I've thought of, which this, so like I'm not the biggest fan of either Clinton. I can't stand Hillary. I do have some, I'm a lot more positive towards Bill. I don't think he was good either, but he's nowhere near as despised on my part as his wife. And I said, it would be so interesting if I wrote a story because Reagan, President Reagan, was diagnosed with, or rather, publicly came out with Alzheimer's in '94, and Nancy spent the last 10 years of his life taking care of him, making sure he was all right, just complete devotion. What I thought would be so cool is if Nancy in '96, or maybe maybe even like '95, right, kind of like leading up to Clinton's reelection, is approached by some RNC officials and they say, listen, you have not been seen as the greatest first lady. You had a lot of people who were detracting of you for just saying no, and you just weren't that well received in that role. But your public approval has gone through the roof because people respect the fact that you are so devoted to the man you love. This is one of the few things in modern politics that people truly believe in, that closeness of that relationship. And we think that if you decide to run for president as someone who is above the fray, who can listen to both sides, like a moderate, like sort of like a Bob Dole figure, but with the added plus of being this like very non-office holding person who is just doing this out of a belief that she's the only one who can save her country from whatever crap Clinton was doing at the time. And I would have her, it wouldn't be in the first chapter, but over the course of the first few chapters, kind of debating, do I really see myself as a commander in chief, the first woman president, me? It's kind of like doubting herself, it's the humility of it all. And it would be during, because and I know we don't have like a specific range of how quickly President Reagan's memories went out, but I would have him encouraging of the idea. And, I would also have her children basically, willing to step up to give her those 4 years if she's elected to govern. And that would be the thing that kind of would parallel her with, I guess, probably Biden, where it's like she makes this agreement with the RNC that, okay, I will run as a candidate in the '96 Republican primary, and if I win, that be your nominee. But if I win the general election, I'm only doing 4 years. She feels that she's gotten, her husband's gotten very old. She's getting up there herself, and it would be her her way of kind of, I guess it's kind of like, let's close out the '90s with this kind of grandma mother esque figure who has to deal with the issues of the time. And I do think that it would be interesting to kind of see what, like, use her again as a commentary and criticism of some of the U.S. policies leading up to the 2010s. Because I might even have it go a little bit further beyond that 4-year tenure. I might have her reaction to Bush, and how after being president herself, she's a lot more critical of him. And I do think that would actually be a good segue of just having the president after her be a member of her own party, and someone who at the same time has the same birthday. So it would it would just be a little fun what if story that would kind of touch on my dislike of the Clintons, and just sort of wanting to see them not get 8 years in the White House, which I don't think they deserved. But yeah, those are the three story ideas I have relating to Nancy. I'm going to try and do at least one of them. I might even try to do all of them. We're just sort of circling the pot here and coming up with some different things that we can do. So thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day.